What comes to mind when you think of the word reboot? If you say it a couple times, it actually becomes kind of weird in your brain. Now, they're nice sometimes, but other times the franchise probably should have just stayed gone. Welcome to Chaos Gaming, everybody. Today, we're going to be checking out some of the absolute worst video game reboots that shouldn't really exist at all. You let me know which of these you unfortunately played, unfortunately dropped money on. Drop a like. Make sure you have those notifications on. We are on our way to 30% subscriber notifications. Help us get there, guys. This is a top 25. If you make it all the way to the end, I love you. At number 25, on the worst, Altered Beast from 2005. Does anybody remember this game? It was an arcade game from 1988. You played as a dude using mythical powers to beat up hordes of enemies and save the daughter of Zeus. I didn't know that was a thing. In 2005, Sega took a swing at rebooting this forgotten gem, but what they ended up doing was making a forgettable beat-em-up similar to God of War, Devil May Cry. The new game, it felt generic, it felt lifeless, whereas the original, it had personality. Altered Beast 2005 was rightly forgotten, but if you haven't played the original, I recommend it because it's one of the most overlooked games of all time. If you get anything from any of my videos, maybe it's that you get to go back and find games you never knew existed. At number 24, Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Now, Mirror's Edge was a cult classic, right? It had a unique concept, got great reviews, but sold poorly due to the lack of brand recognition. After the original game garnered a following, EA decided to shoot another shot with a reboot in 2016 called Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Now, the new game carried over the art style and the gameplay from the first, but the story, it wasn't any good, and it was pretty short, and the new combat system was just bad. There's a reason why cult classic games almost never get good sequels. You can't catch lightning in a bottle a second time. Case in point, Battletoads 2020. I was excited for this. It's one of the most fondly remembered games from the 90s and one of the hardest side-scrolling games, too. It starred a group of toads going through insanely difficult beat-em-up levels, but it all came together to make for a super challenging and rewarding experience. Then came along the 2020 reboot, developed by an inexperienced developer and published by Xbox Game Studios. Battletoads 2020, it had some bright spots, but is infinitely worse than the originals. The combat, it was shallow. The level design, it was repetitive, and there wasn't really nearly as much character in the writing. I mean, it felt lifeless, which is the exact opposite of how the originals were. At number 22, The Legend of Spyro, A New Beginning. Spyro was one of the biggest names of the PS1 era, but like many other 3D platformers, he struggled to make the transition to the HD era. A New Beginning was developed by Chrome Studios and released in late 2006 with Universal Games. It hoped to revitalize that character and get him back on his feet. Heck, they even got Elijah Wood to voice Spyro and freaking Gary Oldman to play his father figure. Come on, you could definitely tell there was love put into the game, but the end result, it wasn't good. The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning got mediocre reviews, and since then, Spyro has been struggling to get back to the mainstream relevance. At number 21, and I love the original game. I really do. If you've never played this, go try it. Bionic Commando. Now, we're talking about the reboot in 2009. Used to be a lighthearted and fun 2D action platformer in arcades, as well as on systems like Game Boy, NES, and Commodore 64. However, Capcom rebooted it in 2009. I don't get it. A dark, gritty 3D action game with one of the weirdest stories and dumbest plot twists in gaming history. Bionic Commando 2009 didn't have any of the charm of the originals, and while it's not a horrible game, it's painfully average and completely forgettable. Just skip it. And if you want to know about the story guideline, go look it up. It's out there. At number 20, Star Fox Zero. Released in 2016, it was meant to revive the long-dormant Star Fox franchise. Now, Star Fox was extremely influential throughout the Super Nintendo days and the N64 days, but ever since then, it's only had a presence in Super Smash Bros. Now, Star Fox Zero launched for the Wii U. It was an attempt to revive this space combat series, but it ended up pushing a lot of people even further away, if you can actually believe that. The controls were bad, it was a short game, and it just wasn't unique. It's a shame. It's a shame what happened to the series, because it used to be one of Nintendo's heaviest hitters. At number 19, let's get a little splatter in there. Splatterhouse 2010 started out as a 2D arcade beat-em-up series that focused on cheesy violence and a ton of references to old horror movies. Splatterhouse 2010, well, it was a 3D beat-em-up with lots of bugs and none of the humor or personality the originals had. It isn't terrible, okay? But when you're rebooting a franchise like this, you have to give more than the bare minimum. Splatterhouse just didn't impress anybody, and the franchise faded back into the obscurity shortly after the launch. At number 18, we're getting into some bad ones. Alone in the Dark, 2008. Now, the original Alone in the Dark was released all the way back in 1992. Most of you probably weren't even born. It helped create the survival horror genre as we know it. So let's fast forward to 2008. We got Alone in the Dark, a series reboot with some decent visuals, but the level design and the storytelling was pretty bad. It got bad reviews, and the publisher Atari even started threatening websites with lawsuits to try and shut them up. And that went about as well as you would expect. The game sucked. There's a reason why you never hear about Alone in the Dark as a franchise anymore. At number 17, you'll remember this one. Star Wars Battlefront 2015. I drank the Kool-Aid on this one. I can admit fault. Everybody did. Battlefront was one of the best shooters of the mid-2000s, so when it was announced that DICE was going to be in charge of a reboot, we rejoiced. And then it took us by surprise. Shallow gameplay, lack of content, gigantic price tag. Not only was this a $60 AAA multiplayer-only game, but it even had more DLC expansions than you would think to buy, despite it not even having a prequel or sequel trilogy content. Battlefront 2015 was very obviously rushed out the door in order to release alongside Episode 7, and it looks incredible, but the game, it was a huge disappointment. But I'll tell you, there's still people that play it. At number 16, Need for Speed 2015. How hard is it to make a good racing game, especially when you have over a decade of good ones to pull your ideas from? Need for Speed 2015 was a next-gen reboot of the long-running franchise that had been struggling since the PS2 era. The reboot, it featured some impressive visuals, of course, and smooth driving, but it was riddled with technical issues, including that dreaded always-online requirement. There also wasn't very much content. You couldn't even pause the game once a race has started, seriously. Even if it was a single-player one against bots, EA is still doing their best to keep this franchise alive, but it's going to need a serious jump start really, really soon, or else people are just going to leave it behind for something else like Forza or Gran Turismo. Now we've reached the top 15 worst reboots that never, ever, ever should have been made. Wolfenstein 2009. Yes, it was one of the most influential shooters ever. Wolfenstein, it struggled throughout the years, and in 2009, Raven, which I like, took a swing at rebooting the series, but they ironically made one of the most forgettable FPS games ever. Wolfenstein 2009 was generic. That's the word I use. I mean, this used to be one of the most innovative franchises in shooter history. I mean, how would you even do that when you're rebooting it? I don't know. At number 14, Conquer Live and Reloaded. Or is it Live and Reloaded? I think it's live. I don't know. I'd never played this game. Now, Conquer's Bad Fur Day, I did. That's one of the best 3D platformers ever. But when Microsoft tried to reboot the license in 2005, it ended up just bumming people out. Conquer L&R, was a remake of Conquer's Bad Fur Day, as well as a series reboot, as Microsoft wanted to bring that character into the new generation of consoles by showing off the power of the Xbox with the remade campaign, as well as new multiplayer mode you had to play on Xbox Live. Conquer L&R was met with very mixed reception due to the abundance of censorship and cut content from the original game, as well as quite a few areas where it actually looked worse than the N64 version, which is crazy. It's a reboot. How can it look worse? The multiplayer mode, it was pretty fun. Well, they say it was fun. I don't know. But as a remake of Conquer's Bad Fur Day, it was a huge step backwards. And as a reboot of the series, well, it clearly didn't work because it's been over 16 years since this came out. And we still haven't gotten a new Conquer game. So, maybe. At number 13, raise your hand if you like dinosaur games. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Turok 2008. I loved Turok back in the day, but the 2008 reboot, it put the nail in the franchise coffin, which is sad. It took the unique foundation of the N64 originals and it made it play like a very generic mid-2000s FPS. It had bland visuals, realistic weapons, and a story that made no sense. Turok reviewed and sold bad. It threw the franchise in the trash bin forever. Next up, Guitar Hero Live. Now, Guitar Hero dominated the video game world during the late 2000s, but it suffered an untimely death due to the exposure. In 2015, Activision tried one last time to bring it back with Guitar Hero Live, which was a series reboot with a new controller scheme and a ton of new gameplay features. So, what happened? Well, aside from the fact nobody wanted to fork over $100 for a new guitar controller, Guitar Hero Live drastically overcomplicated things in the Guitar Hero formula. It also had a super heavy emphasis on microtransactions, which was painfully ironic because just after, 3 years after the release, Activision shut down the servers, which removed over 400 songs from the game and reduced all those DLC songs you bought into nothingness. Poof, they're gone in the cloud and smoke. Digital smoke. Congratulations. You wasted your money. Now we're at number 11. Medal of Honor 2010. Now, after Activision successfully brought Call of Duty to the modern era with COD 4, EA decided they should give Medal of Honor the same treatment. They released it, and they brought the series into the modern era. They told a story about terrorists and a World War III scare, just like COD had recently done. Unfortunately, when EA was reading off of Activision's homework, they forgot to actually make their game fun. Medal of Honor 2010 is boring. It's forgettable. It didn't have any of the good qualities of the previous entries. Then, once Medal of Honor Warfighter came around, well, guess what? It was lights out for that franchise. Now, I would like to see Medal of Honor 3, but I don't know if it's ever going to happen. At number 10, Thief 2004. For those who haven't played the original Thief games, they were some of the best stealth games ever made, and back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were some of the best reviewed PC games in the world. Square Enix? No. They decided to modernize the franchise with a full reboot, which was a bad idea. The gameplay was heavily simplified to make it appeal to a wider audience, while the characters were all changed and given new backstories, none of which were any good. Thief 2014 got mediocre reviews from critics, but it was ripped apart by you and me gamers and fans alike for the series. They saw it as an abomination of their beloved franchise. I don't blame them. At number 9, Dungeon Keeper 2014. Now, Dungeon Keeper was a very popular RTS series for the PC in the late 90s. You played as, guess what? A dungeon keeper, trying to protect their goods and keep invading characters out or taking them prisoner. It was a deep and addicting game, so fans were excited when EA announced a series reboot over a decade later. Surprise, surprise! Dungeon Keeper 2014 was horrible. Instead of being a deep PC strategy game, it was now a simple mobile tower defense game with more paywalls than a toll booth during tax season. Seriously, aside from being a crap game, Dungeon Keeper became the poster child for predatory business models as EA desperately tried to rework it, save face. It didn't work. At number 8, BanjoKazooie Nuts and Bolts. I know people who are still mad about this game. It was one of the most popular franchises of the N64 era. It featured great characters, a great soundtrack, and addicting gameplay. So Microsoft bought the IP in the early 2000s. They announced a big revival. They were going to do it for the 360. BanjoKazooie Nuts and Bolts was released for the 360 in 2008. It was met with astronomical backlash from the fan base. Let me say that again. Astronomical backlash. Instead of a 3D platformer, it was now a freaking vehicle construction game. I'm sorry. What? Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how that becomes a plan. How do you turn an iconic 3D platformer into a game about building cars? And thanks to the mediocre reviews and immense fan backlash, the game ended up being one of the most hated in Microsoft's entire library. Seriously, whose idea was it? How much did they get paid to come up with that idea? And did they get fired? At number 7, SimCity 2013. Now, SimCity is one of the longest running franchises in gaming history, dating all the way back to 1989. EA decided to give it a nice coat of paint with a full series reboot simply called SimCity. Unfortunately, you probably know where this one's going as soon as I said EA, right? SimCity not only streamlined a lot of the gameplay mechanics from previous titles, but it was riddled with technical problems, including some horrible always-online policies that made it almost unplayable during launch week. The game has since been patched. It's decent. It's an alright game now, but it's nowhere near as good as some of the originals, so it shouldn't exist. I know, that's harsh. And now number 6, Contra Rogue. This is one of the worst games of the decade. It was supposed to be a full reboot of the classic shoot-'em-up franchise from Konami, up, down, down, left, right. Sadly, though, it essentially turned into the gaming industry's Lex Luthor over the last 10 years, and Contra Rogue was bad. I didn't even know they still made games this bad. Top-down shooter, lots of explosions, particle effects, and try to hide the atrocious graphics and design choices. It was torn apart, with a few journalists even calling it the worst game of 2019. Congratulations. Just let Contra rest, man. Stop trying to reboot it. Just leave it be. Now we've reached the top 5 worst reboots of all time that never should have been made. Do you like that title? At number 5, Space Raiders. Almost 20 years later, this one baffles me. Space Raiders was a third-person shooter meant to be a reimagining of the Space Invaders arcade game, modernized for 21st century audiences and possibly setting up a new franchise for new revenue. Did anything happen? No, it didn't. Space Raiders was a bizarre case, and even when judged on its own, it's not good. Simple shooting, uninspired levels, terrible graphics. Space Raiders just felt like a cash grab, which it was, instead of the new, unique vision it was advertised to be. I mean, seriously, just go play Space Invaders. Don't look at Space Raiders. At number 4, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Here it is. You knew it. You just didn't know where. It was one of the most infamous games ever released, and it's still referenced to this day as how to not do a series reboot. It was meant to celebrate our Blue Speedster's 15th anniversary while also bring him into the new console generation, but there was problems. Problems. It was unfinished. It was creepy, too. The story was creepy. It really was. It was ripped apart by everybody who played it, and unlike many other bad Sonic games, I don't think a single person is going to defend this one in the comments. With most Sonic games, there'll be at least one person trying to tell you it wasn't that bad. With Sonic 06, it's a turd, and everybody knows it. There's only 3 left. Can you guess what they are in order? Bomberman Act Zero at number 3. I will never get tired of smack-talking this game. Bomberman is a colorful and family-friendly franchise, so when Konami decided to reboot it in this dark, gritty, post-apocalyptic train wreck, the writing was on the wall. I mean, the writing was on the wall. Bomberman Act Zero is one of the dumbest games I've ever seen. It didn't even have the decency to be good. It's one thing if you make it a good, dark, gritty game. No. Act Zero is complete garbage on top of being a total disaster. Stay away from it. At number 2. The COD Killer. Homefront The Revolution. The original Homefront had an interesting concept, but it was a big swing and a big miss. So when it came time to reboot the series, the developers took the criticism to heart and they fixed the problems, right? No. It was somehow even worse than the original. It was a dumb story, uninspired gameplay, more bugs than you could list on a particularly long piece of paper. In Homefront, it was a tragic case because both games could have been really good if they were given more time in the oven. But no, they weren't. So both times, we got a buggy mess that you wasted your money on. At number 1, here we are. Guess what? No shocker. Duke Nukem Forever. Come on. 15 years in development. You would think we would get something good, right? No, Duke Nukem Forever deleted everything that made the original Duke games good. Bad shooting, bad jokes, bad writing, lots of bugs, no replay value. This was the game that single-handedly killed Duke Nukem. And unless he gets the greatest comeback ever in the gaming world, which I don't see happening, he's probably going to stay RIP forever. There you have it. If you made it to the end of this video, I truly, truly appreciate you guys. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.